Are you ready to hear from Idaho's next governor? Welcome to North Idaho Experience. In today's episode, we sit down with Mark Fitzpatrick, owner of Old State Saloon, former cop, and he's running for governor against Brad Little. Check him out. Man, where do we start, Mark? Thank you for coming up here. Much appreciated. People are going to want to know who you are. I just recently learned through your social media that you're a former law enforcement too, just like all the rest of us here. So I'd love to dive into your background a little bit, and then we'll get into what you plan to do.
Well, it was a dark and stormy night on March 2nd of 1978. I was born. That's actually a good start. I have parents that are just awesome people, still married and alive and live down the street from me today, and very involved in our family's lives. And I watched my dad. He was Los Angeles Police Department for 25 years.
Heck yeah. And
15 years after that for Simi Valley Police Department. So he has two pensions that he has, and he's a 40-year police officer, and I think that had a big impact for me growing up, just watching him come home and tell stories about making a difference in people's lives and all of the crazy antics that go on out there in the world, when the depths of evil that he would be able to appropriately convey to me based off of my age at the time and explain it to me. But I really think it was part of forming, who I am and how my worldview, how I view things in life and everything. But yeah, so I grew up in California, and when I went to high school, I was a relatively high performer and got congressional nominations I took them and took an appointment to United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. But I went for plebe summer, which I don't know if you know about this stuff, but it's really hard to get into West Point or Annapolis, but it's also hard to get out too. But you have 2 years to decide if you want to stay. So I stayed for plebe summer and the first semester, which is the hardest part, and then I just knew it wasn't right for me, and so I left, took my grades, left, and finished in three and a half years, where I kind of grew up, played soccer, Division I soccer, Cal State Northridge. And then straight out of there into Orange County Sheriff's Academy.
Okay. And then what department were you with?
Newport Beach Police.
Got it. How many years did you spend there?
99 to 2014.
Got it.
12 years full-time. And I ended up leaving because I had businesses. I realized God kind of wired me to be extremely entrepreneurial. And so I had businesses going while I was a police officer. And eventually, one of those businesses had 25 full-time employees, and I was still a full-time police officer.
Oh, my God.
And we had 6 children. And my wife's like, do you think you could choose one of these careers here, So I ended up it's a very difficult decision to leave the for sure government job with benefits and retirement and everything. And went and full speed ahead into actually what was a luxury real estate marketing company at that point in time. And it was international company, and we were like the hottest thing. And then a couple years later, due to the fluctuation of the yen versus the dollar of all things, I lost a $12 million contract, and I had to lay off 25 people. And so that was the point where, and we can talk more about that company if you want to, but that was the point where I was like, man, I have to regrow something. I left police work, I have to rebuild a business, and I just do not want to do this in the dumpster fire that is California, because of all the reasons we all know, I think.
Something going
taxes.
on in California? Well, I haven't heard anything about that.
It's crazy that a state that is that big can literally make it so difficult for businesses to thrive. You think of the impact that small businesses have on communities, taxes, income, prosperity for everybody, and how difficult they have made it, especially over recent years, to actually have a small business there.
I think it's almost like our whole country is designed to favor big box development and big box stores and things coming in. And the mom and pop shops, it's very challenging because you're not dealing with, they make it so that you can only survive if you're dealing with mass numbers of things. And if you go and you want to dare to have organic food or something like that, it's just extremely difficult to compete with the world. So no matter what your business is, if it's something that's not big box, it makes it so much more difficult. But California being what it was with politics and taxes and everything, and this is something that I think is really interesting. When you're a business owner and you have to deal with being in a location that has very high taxes, you have to pay taxes on all these things, and you're constantly annoyed with the taxes that you have to pay. But when you hire 20, 25 people, you have to pay them enough so that they can pay their taxes.
Right.
And when you hire them in a place like Southern California, their taxes are astronomically higher than somewhere else. And so you start to, when you still really start to think about the taxes, it just drives you crazy. And in California, like you said, you get past your first year in business, and it's almost like they say to you, wow, you got past your first year. Well, here's 10 more hurdles for you,
Right.
to try to make through your second.
Well, it's also amazing, too, owning a business, how many times a single dollar gets taxed, right? You can watch it just diminish
Yeah.
to almost nothing. And I think, Idaho's been really big on that. We have a lot of people that move here, and they have a tendency to talk about taxes. That's a huge topic of conversation that we have with people every single day looking to move here. And ultimately, when you look at Idaho in general, we're a very anti-tax state. When I see a tax hit a ballot, man, it has to really, really change minds for anybody to vote for it, because people do not want extra taxes.
But part of it is the stigma that's attached from other state, like levies. When you see school levies come through in Idaho, in other states, that's a bad word. They see it get abused. They're exorbitant. It's crazy. Washington just increased the taxable amount for their levies by dang near, I think it's 60% in this last round. It was 50 or 60%. That means they could tax even more for the schools. So when they see a levy here, they automatically assume it's a brand new form of tax. And we actually came out and did a little bit of a video on why it's different in Idaho than it is in, say, Washington. Because levies here are really important for all the extracurricular activities and stuff like that, because the state will give them a certain amount per student. But, yeah, sometimes it's just changing people's minds, giving them a little perspective.
Regardless, levy, whatever, I'm still going to look at it like, is the government involved? There's probably a lot of waste happening here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The government gets involved, you get slower and less efficient.
Yes.
That is it. So, Mark, can I just tip this off for everybody that's watching right here? You have decided to run for governor
Yes.
of Idaho.
Yeah.
Now, this is a very red state. We have a quote-unquote conservative red governor in place right now.
Right.
Why are you stepping forward to try to run for that position?
Because he's not that. And I'll tell you, like, I've never thought I would be running for really any office. I didn't really have any attraction to getting into politics in that way. I am very much, and I have demonstrated very much in the last several years of being willing and wanting to stand up for what's right and true and for culture war things. And there's been things that have happened as a result of that that we could get into. But, because of that experience that I had with doing all that, standing for what's right and true, and all the negative and positive things that happen as a result, and looking and just kind of going through that process that I think we all have gone through, which is realizing, wow, there is just a lot of deception and evil at every level and just integrated into all aspects of our society. Watching Idaho at the state level, watching and seeing bills go and then die, and these are supposed to be Republicans that are, working for the will of the people, and these good bills are dying. So just seeing all that, being very frustrated with it all, seeing what happened with that period of time after the pandemic came through. I'm trying not to say certain words.
Did you say plandemic or pandemic?
Yeah.
I couldn't hear you.
Planning,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll seeing all that happen and all the money coming for an agenda. When you look back in hindsight, this whole agenda happened, had a lot of money attached to it. There was a lot of socialist Marxist agendas attached to that money, strings attached, etc. Mass amounts of people coming in who are not Americans. Very, very frustrated with all that. Especially since I know this state is beautiful. The people I love them. I love the state. It's just really hard to see that. So I'm in this November of this year, And I was asking around, and there's just nobody nobody running against the current governor, Governor Little. And that's when it just kind of clicked to me, maybe, and I'm a Christian, I'm a spiritual guy, and maybe this is why God had me go through all this crap that I went through the last couple years, was to prepare me and my family for this. Maybe this is something that I am supposed to do. And so I kind of started praying about it at that point in time. And I just said, if you would have me do this, Lord, show me. And he did, like the next 5 weeks.
You know, it's interesting too, is because in Idaho, there's really not much of a runoff between Democrat and Republican in this state.
Correct.
I mean, truthfully, whoever ends up getting that nomination for Republican, you can expect them to win.
Correct. And
Okay.
that's like the May 19th thing.
Right.
Is the thing that we need to be telling people.
Right. May 19th is the real election. Absolutely.
Correct.
This is like the 49ers and Cowboys back in the late 90s. Like, they're both in the NFC. Is it NFC or is it AFC?
It's the Seahawks Rams this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Anyways.
yeah.
But back in the day, I used to laugh and say that's always the Super Bowl. Whoever wins that's going to win. So obviously, May 19th is really, really important because that's really who's probably going to determine to be the lead runner in an actual election for governor. You mentioned Brad Little, and I know that we talked about it out there before we came in, and you said we were talking about Republicans, and you said he's not. Can you speak more on that?
Well, like if you go through the Republican platform, which you can look at online on Idaho GOP website, it's relatively lengthy, and I was reading through it, and I jive and agree with everything that's there. But there's a spirit of true transparency that would be in that party because it's founded on biblical principles. It's got a preamble. Like 50 states in our country do, the preamble of their constitution begins with the foundation of the Creator, God. And then everything comes, that's following is based off of that foundation. And so you have in the Republican Party this sense of what should be transparency and truth happening. And that is, you do not get that at all. That's not what is happening at all from our governor's office. And it's not an office that serves the people and it involves the people. Instead, it seems to be something that answers to big whatever, big agri, big dairy, big pharma, big whatever. And if we're going to fix the problems that we have in our world, it's going to take the people getting far more involved in our government. The reason we are where we are is because good, ethical, moral people were apathetic for decades, staying out of the fight, head down, working hard, doing good things on a daily basis for their family, friends, church, whatever, but basically staying out of the culture war fight and just saying, I'm not gonna look that direction. I'm just gonna stay in my bubble over here. When you do that, evil will continue to encroach.
That is extreme. We talk about apathy all the time on this podcast because folks that grew up here tend to take that stance of Idaho's great. It's always been great, and they don't generally get super involved in things. The switch we've seen is people moving here, coming from states like California, Oregon, Washington, where they've seen that shift in the last 20 years, how you cannot be apathetic over there because it happens quickly. They have taken a much deeper role in politics here and the culture here, which is when people complain about those moving here, I'm like, well, hold on. Like, they're really stepping up and they want to get involved and fix these things just so it doesn't go down that road because they know very well what it looks like real quick.
So I would say our current government is a government that has, and whether it was planned or not, it's adapted to a people that are very apathetic. And so you elect us into office and then we take care of things and you go about your business and you don't know what we do. And that's when nefarious things happen behind, closed doors in offices and things like that.
Yeah, you see, I mean, and that is, honestly, I'd say that is one of the biggest issues that, and I'm just using general terms, the Republican Party has is the apathy, right? You get a lot of people that are just happy and working class, whatever else it is, and they don't have time to go vote. They don't want to go do the vote. They don't want to drive into town. They're happy on their own little, just leave me alone. Emotion drives everything. I mean, you can go back and you can see this in major cultural shifts. You look back at the Great Depression and you look at what happened in Pearl Harbor and things like that. All of a sudden, everybody got really emotional. And then there was pretty much a blank check to the government to we're willing to do whatever it takes, right? I think that's something that we're losing control of right now, is that there's not the emotion driving. There is from the left. There's a lot of, if you look at that entire campaign on the left, everything is emotional. It's about these rights for these, literally minority groups and everything else. And this feel good message that goes through that doesn't necessarily make sense. And I don't think we necessarily have that on a conservative side very much, because it's a very comfortable world we live in, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if there's some major escalation going on across the country. The fact is, I can go home every night, I can sit on my couch with my wife and my kids, and we can watch The Office, right? And we can have a good time doing those things. So we become very apathetic to that, and there's not the emotion that falls behind it. And I think, honestly, that's something that our party misses. And I don't want to say our party, but I think that's what a lot of the conservatives miss, is that emotional side, which is starting to come back, to get somebody in place to where they can look at the preamble to something and say, hey, this is actually where our roots are.
Yeah, agreed. And so that's where I believe at this point in time, people are not aware of this, but we are at essentially a DEFCON 1. I mean, we're at that point where it's tipping, and it could tip in a total destructive, direction.
Are you talking about just Idaho or the nation as a whole?
Both. Yep. But Idaho is more shocking to people because they're not aware of that. They think, they think we're in this red state and everything's fine. Reality is that, you start scratching a little bit on the surface of what's going on with our government, which has increased its budget by 70% since 2018. And that was very strategic, and it was all related to the years after that pandemic that happened, and all of the billions of dollars that were going around and the strings attached to those things. And we look hindsight, and when money comes in, they want you to create an agency to address some problem. They also have simultaneously refugees going into all these different states. Simultaneously, there's millions of people coming across the border during these years, many of them winding up in Idaho. And you wind up here with money coming in and the government deciding, let's build a health and welfare department that's $6.5 billion. That's how much the budget is. And there's going to be a heck of a lot of waste and fraud and things going on. And I tell you, I went out and, I was pretty much inspired by Nick Shirley. I went out and did very similar things. I don't know if you saw it, but I filmed it and edited it and put it out. And I, over 4 days, visited about 25 Somali daycares in Boise area and found nothing but signs of a bunch of fraud. Whether the place just wasn't even there at all.
That's crazy.
Or there's supposed to be 12 kids and there's one or none. Or it's just like a total joke. I went to one place that was more of like a medical hospice treatment place, and it was just in a dump apartment, and the people there were like, I don't know of any medical thing ever being here. And that one had the reason I went there, because I was focusing on daycares, the reason I went there is because somebody found it and said that there had been over $3 million going to that.
Oh.
So because of that, I put those out, and this was right around the time where I was coming to the point of making a decision about running or not. After doing that, and I saw that, I put it out. Letters were created by a couple of the senators, and as a result, I'm told there were 15 daycares shut down based from their letters, which I think was inspired by hopefully the fact that I went out and did that. Who knows what other results there are, because once people realize that people are paying attention and the jig is up, then suddenly they flee from the crimes and the fraud and everything that they're doing. So a little action like that, what Nick Shirley did, rippling across the country, can have a massive effect. And so we can get down on ourselves and we can think, are we ever going to fix this? There's so much fraud everywhere and everything. But once the fraudsters see that people are paying attention and actually care and are not distracted anymore by their extremely personalized lattes that they order in the morning, and comfortability and entertainment, but they're actually paying attention to what's going on in our world, they will flee. They'll run. And so that's what I want to bring. I want to bring that. I want to bring it in a big way. A governor who's going to rally the people to be very, very involved with the government, and that will solve all the policy questions and problems and immigration bills that they're getting killed in the drawer. and corruption and bloating and taxes and wanting to get rid of property taxes first and foremost, if we can fix transparency and communication and get way more people involved, it will all end up fixing itself.
Man, I've always thought politics are interesting because I've often questioned, why does it just seem the life cycle of a politician? Because I think the majority that get into it, especially in a state like this, have altruistic intentions at the beginning. Right? They desire to go out and make the state a better place, make their community a better place, outreach, make it safer, all of those things. And the natural progression becomes they stop acting in the best interests of the people that elected them, and they start acting in the best interests of the bureaucracy itself. And that certainly seems to be that because politicians, there's really no accountability, especially when you no longer fear a vote. And fear of vote's not the right word, but you're not accountable to the vote anymore. And in this state, once you're in and you're on the red ticket, you're in, right? At least for now.
Yep.
So it just seems like what you're talking about is accountability and transparency, and that's what some people are doing out there. And podcasts like this, where it's not some canned speech, because when we get through all this, anybody can set up a 10-minute speech to give. Right? No, people are going to get to know who you are.
Yeah, and that's why I said when we met, ask whatever question you want. Like, I want people to know who I am.
This isn't canned.
Yeah, no.
We're already at 21 minutes. We're well past any canned.
I got
Hold on. So Eric mentioned the accountability thing, and you might not be aware of this, but we just started Idaho Court Watch, and that is the entire goal of it, is to hold the judicial system accountable.
Good. It needs to happen.
It's a nonprofit up here. We intend to take it statewide and maybe beyond that. There are other examples of this in other states, and I know it's been tried up here, but it hasn't gone very far.
Well, yeah, these guys have done a huge job with that, and the truth is that you can have all the laws to say whatever you want, but if they're not being enforced, that's a problem.
Yep.
Right.
Well, and at a micro level, because you're talking politics, in a local community, judges can have some of the greatest impact on people's quality of life here. And really the goal is not to tell you who to vote for. It's just we get surveys out to people that are in the court system all the time, and there's only 5 categories to rank. Mm-hmm. And that way when you go vote, because right now you look at the bottom, should we retain this judge? Nobody even knows who they are. And by the way, you can't find it. You can't find the track record at all. I'd love to see that for politicians too. I know, we had him on the podcast where he ranks
Matt Edwards.
Yes. Yeah, he ranks them in politics so people can see if they meet the certain guys that are established by this group. But otherwise, there's no accountability. It's R's and D's, man. That's it.
Yeah, so check this out. All year round in Idaho, you've got the executive branch that's there working, doing their thing, etc. All year round, you've got the judicial branch that's doing their thing, judging, whatever. And then the branch that represents the people is there for 3 months trying to cram their work into the 3 months. And then the rest of the 9 months, the other 2 branches are just kind of like running along the way, however they want to, right? It just so happens to be we have an executive branch right now where, okay, that 3 months happens and certain bills are being buried or whatever, and that's the will of the people, but whatever, they're being buried. They're not even making it past legislature to Senate, especially immigration bills. And things are sort of happening for the people, and then you get into this period of time where they're not represented. Well, you guys had a seat at the table for 3 months out of the 12, and it just seems kind of bizarre to me that is the case and that the people are underrepresented.
Well, you look at the logistics of it, and look, Idaho's always seemed to be 10 or 15 years behind what other states are recognizing, and I speak from like fentanyl legislation, right? But it always seems to fall in behind, and right now it's required. Like we had Heather Scott on the podcast. For her, she has a full-time job. She has to travel down to Boise. She has to get an apartment down there. She's got to get all those changes of clothes to go in and do that job for 3 months. In today's day and age, I would much rather see their ability to be available for a session where virtually, right, where it doesn't require her to travel 9 hours and live 3 months away from her district. I want her connected from a citizen standpoint. I want her connected with their people as much as possible, immersed in it. Yeah. Right? I want her out there to be able to actually speak the will of the people. Once you get into Boise and you get in that big shiny building and it's all nice and you're living up there, that's another thing. It's not just that you started off altruistic, but you lose your perspective. You're no longer on the street. That's why I think it's got a shelf life.
Yep.
What you're running for, in my opinion, has a shelf life. I don't know about you. I'm a big fan of term limits.
I am too.
Because you just lose your freaking perspective.
Yeah. I have a question about the difference between North and South Idaho. We obviously
on my list,
we're
bro.
up here.
Me too.
Yeah.
We've had tons of city council, mayors, legislators that live up here, and there's a lot of great people. There's a lot of people stepping up like you are that, never had any intention of getting into politics and are doing it out of a feeling of civic duty. Is it the same in Southern Idaho or like Boise area where you're at?
As far as people stepping forward like that?
Yeah, and like what's the cultural difference? I haven't spent a lot of time down there. I don't know.
And so admittedly, whenever we have to answer a question like this, I always just have to admit to myself I have my own bubble, right? And so I try to hear other bubbles and what's going on, but there's probably a reason for that. We're just fed our information that we want to hear and we're used to hearing. And then we have our actual real life physical bubbles that we live in. And we tend to live and interact with people that are most like ourselves. So there's always other information out there. But the way it seems to me is that there are a lot of people who are very eager to get involved and fight. I think the percentage of them who are actually not native is actually pretty high. And there is that potential reasoning that they've been in the place that got wrecked because of bad politics and corruption and everything else. And they're in a wonderful place that they love, and they want to protect it from becoming that place that was wrecked. You have the flip side where people say the new people coming in are the reason why they're actually causing the wreckage and everything.
The New California movement.
Right, the New California movement, et cetera. I don't really buy that so much because that's not what I'm seeing, And I would say that Idaho is getting wrecked because the culture in general, regardless of people coming in and out of Idaho, went a very, very, unethical, immoral direction in this recent decade or so of history because of the media and information that was being fed to us on all of our devices and media and everything else. And the money, the amount of money that was behind it. The money was huge because we're already seeing results of USAID being cut that are having ripple effects across the country with now all of a sudden 2025 LGBTQ events were severely underfunded, many of them shutting, not even having their events because the funding wasn't there all of a sudden. So then everyone's scratching their head like, okay, maybe this had something to do with all the USAID and NGOs, and looking into it and finding out it sure did actually have a lot to do with that.
So, dude, there's so much here. I guess going back to a couple things, Mark, is running for that position is going to be rough. You're wearing a shirt right now that I joked with you and I said, is this what do you normally wear an overcoat? And you're like, not normally, but you got your not for sale shirt on, which
right.
I think a lot of people really appreciate. I think that that reflects a lot of our values, that we don't want politicians that can be bought off. But I also know that when people get into politics, there's the drive to get into the position, right? Mm-hmm. And we all know that there is funding that helps that. There's a lot of backings from large organizations, lobbyists, and everything else to get you into that position. So from your perspective, obviously getting into that position, if you were to get there, you obviously know you're going up against other people that are lobbying for Brad Little and, mm-hmm. and other people for that spot. But what do you see, like when we talk about your motivation to go here, the question is, what are your big things? What are your big three, your big few that if you got into that position that you have the ability to change, that you really see needs to be changed with Idaho?
So I think first and foremost, the way the communication happens, we kind of touched on that already. Populist. One thing I do really love about Trump is the way that he rallies the people in the country. Putting political pressure on the legislative and judicial branches, when the executive branch, and trying to get things done is not the way that I would want to do things. I would want to basically be so transparent that the people end up putting the pressure on. That's the way it should be. So that fixing that first and foremost will help every other problem. Okay. Number one problem of actual policy type problems beyond setting up a more populist government would be immigration. To me, it's very, very clear that that is our number one problematic issue right now. And it's something that needs to be addressed. We are in a difficult situation, unfortunately, as a result of previous administrations and millions of people coming into our country. and these people are non-American, and they've been set up in a situation where they are running businesses and incentivized to run businesses that are basically fraudulent and or not at least somewhat fraudulent. And they are living the American dream before some Americans are able to live the American dream, and the taxes are basically coming from those Americans, which this is just totally unacceptable. And I am a guy who's definitely America first, meaning we need to take care of Americans and our own people first and foremost. I do believe that America can become an extremely rich and prosperous country. And so that comes down into Idaho as a state, and I believe the same thing for Idaho. Leads us into the next topic, which would be taxes. I really want to eliminate taxes, reduce and eliminate taxes. In order to do that, you need to switch it over to a different tax. No, I don't want to switch it to a different tax. I want to eliminate or reduce taxes. So the way you do that is you have to slim the government way down, and I've seen plenty of extra things to basically cut out. Like I said, we grew 70% from 2018 to now.
And you're just talking about just Idaho's government.
That's just Idaho's
And
government.
and just to put it in perspective, the population did not grow 70% since
Correct.
2018, right?
Right.
Not even close.
Right. And so, but even if it did, I don't think the state budget should grow whatever the percentage of the increase of people was
Right.
necessarily. So cutting the property taxes would be critical. So how do you do that? The best way I can explain is to think about what the latest Trump administration has done. Now, they came in, and this was had a lot of pushback, but he came in and said, hey, look, I'm going to bring in additional income that we've never seen before, okay, through tariffs. And we can potentially get rid of the Internal Revenue Service and bring in the External Revenue Service. Have you heard him say these things before?
Yeah.
So if that should turn a light on in people's minds, and we know that we are led down a path to believe certain things, and then as a result of that, we kind of just live those things because that's all we were taught. I think we were taught basically that in order for our government to function and everything, we have to pay taxes. We have to pay this tax and this tax and this tax and this tax. And they're just part of the requirement of life. And I don't think that that's the case. I think that there's things like tariffs that you can do that would eliminate taxes. We in this country, but more importantly in the state of Idaho, are very blessed to have a tremendous amount of natural resources, and the will and hard work and ethic of the American people and the foundation we were given as a government are tremendously valuable things. And if we think outside the box, we can bring in external income sources other than taxes that would allow us to eliminate. And I can give a specific example if you want to hear it.
Sure.
Okay. So one thing that I'm really looking at, and I was able to do a little bit of research myself, and I'm not an expert at this topic, but and I would very, very deeply look into it once I'm in the governor's office. But we have mining here in Idaho. I'm sure you're aware of that. Precious metals. People are talking about thorium, but super fuels and things like that are in our mountains and underground, and we have amazing rivers and trees and lumber and everything else. But if you just take silver, one frustrating thing about silver in Idaho is that a company comes in, and the biggest companies are not Idaho companies, by the way. They're not owned by Idahoans. In fact, the biggest company is owned by BlackRock and Vanguard. If you know, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But they come into Idaho and they mine, and they're pulling out silver, and they're paying us 1%. And so I thought, wow, that seems really low. And I didn't know anything about anything, so I just start researching. Alaska, depending on which land you're on, they get up to 10%. We used to make 3%. In early 2000s, I think it was 2002, some legislative deal was made or passed where it dropped down to 1% from 3% to 1%.
You think anybody made money off that deal?
That's exactly what I'm.
No way.
Whose pockets were lined on
Yeah.
that deal, right? And which companies came in after that, and what arrangements were made, and all that. But on the surface, the explanation goes, "Oh, we are doing the whole mining industry a favor by reducing the taxes down to 1%. This will incentivize companies to come into Idaho," and it sounds really great and pleasant, right? Meanwhile, you look at Alaska, and they've got royalties on certain land and tax here and base this and all this stuff, and getting up to 10%. I would like to push more towards getting 10%. Now, you look and they dismiss this as a meaningful income source. They, meaning like the last person that did a study on this or whatever I found online. Oh, we only make $40 million a year off that. Well, we're only doing 1%. What if we were doing 10%?
So you make $400 million.
400, but
right.
This is off of old values for silver. Where's silver value going, do you think?
Oh.
I mean, I think it's going way above where it recently hit at 121. I think it's actually going to go way above that.
Yeah.
Let's say it hits where I think it's going to hit. It'll be about 10 times the value that they did the last kind of study, okay? So now we're 100x, 10% instead of 1%, and 10 times the value. 100x, now you're looking at $4 billion.
Yeah.
$4 billion is easy enough to eliminate property taxes in Idaho.
Wait, so you're saying there's a situation potentially where I no longer have to rent the land that I own from the government?
I think if we responsibly, yes, I think if we responsibly look at this. Now, again, this is just, I'm a retired or 15-year police officer, bar owner, business owner, and I do have decent acumen, but I'm not an expert at mining and finances and all these things. But why aren't people asking these questions? Because I have mentioned this to many people, and nobody has come back to me and said, you're way off base here. This can't be possible.
Right.
Nobody said that. What we're doing is being like, well, I always just assumed we couldn't do something other than pay taxes. And people's solution for not paying taxes, the only solution that they have so far is to cut government spending. That's great. That's part of it. But how can we increase our income? And I think, and you may think I'm crazy, I think Idaho's sitting on trillions of dollars of value.
Mm. There's a lot to break down here, and I like all of it.
Yeah.
Okay,
I know what you're about to bring up.
What that states compete with that? No, not yet. But states do compete with each other. We talk about this all the time. And the most valuable commodity in our country is good, productive members of society. They're not a burden on the rest of our systems. States compete. Ron DeSantis is trying to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. He wants to remove property taxes. If states are out there and they're competing to see who can reduce property taxes more to attract good, productive members of society, that's a win for all of us. And I even look at it at a micro level, because I had this frustration. I used to help with our negotiations with Coeur d'Alene City. I was Coeur d'Alene PD. And it's tough because the existing citizens don't want to pay that 3% additional foregone taxes in order to pay for services when their requirement for services are not any higher. I'm talking about as we continue to grow in population. So we'd say it's a resort town, right? It is still, tourism is our number one industry in Coeur d'Alene. Our number one employer is Kootenai Health. So how do we find a way of capturing that? There's a huge burden, I can tell you, from the law enforcement side in the summertime because it gets a lot busier. What's funny is there's antiquated Idaho statutes such as Idaho Code 50-1044, which has to do with the resort town designation. We can't make a decision as a local community if our population's over 10,000 on whether or not we're a resort town.
And which would charge a bed tax.
Then we could charge a bed tax. And it's the same thing you're talking about. How do we take the fact that we are a desirable place to go because bums don't crap on our streets, right? And you don't have to worry about getting mugged. Right, yet. Well, North Idaho, man, I say this all the time. I'm not going to say we're not going to fall. We're just going to be one of the last ones standing.
With the boots on, yeah.
Yes, but it's the same philosophy you're talking about. Why not allow some of that, inherent freedom of the city that knows this area the best to make some of the decisions that are best for themselves instead of further burdening the citizens that live here?
Yeah, it's a shift of thinking. And I think, like I said, it's a history of being told you can't do that. If you imagine a kid growing up with a parent that says, "Oh, you can't do that," they're going to be less likely to do anything in life that's meaningful. But if they have a parent who says, "Hey, we can figure this out. Let's think about this and figure out how to solve this problem. And you can do this. We can do this, right?" I think that we're just like, you can't get out of the tax burden. You can't get out of the enslavement that they've put you in. But I think we can.
Well, the problem is too is like people typically complain about taxes when they don't see a benefit, right? If you told me, hey, everybody here give me $10 and you're never going to have any road issues again. And then every time I went out and drove, there was no potholes. There was no issues getting snowed cleared. Everything was nice.
Take my money.
People would probably be willing to give it the money. The problem is that, like you said, there's a lot of waste. And so people are giving their money and they're saying, what do I get from it? And when you brought up earlier, we were talking about big business and everything else. When you jump on, I go off on this all the freaking time. When you go and you pay Starbucks or you pay Amazon or you pay Walmart, you're sending money out of your community. Now, that to me is an issue, because when we send money overseas out of our state, just across our border, then we don't have the money to use here to fix the issues that we have. Now, there's this whole idea, well, it comes back to you. It doesn't. It's gone. And so when you have a community that's complaining about their roads and their school systems and all these other things, well, why? It's really, where are we putting our money and where are we investing it? And taxes should be a form of investment back into our country, back into our state, but it's not happening that way. Money's getting used up completely inefficiently, and that's a huge problem with our government.
That's how taxes started. It was
Right.
voluntary. Imagine where you actually look at your government instead of having a poll that means nothing, favorable or unfavorable. Your tax dollars spoke for you. Where you're like, yeah, I believe in the direction. Can you imagine how few taxes we would have as a country, or let alone a state, if it was actually whether or not you agreed with the direction we were going?
Yeah, or if you could pick and choose where your tax dollars went. Like you get a checklist at the beginning of the year.
Imagine
Boom,
that.
boom, boom.
Or like leaving a tip, at the end, they want you to choose 15, 20, 25%.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's huge. So I love the idea of finding other sources of revenue, because that is true, because constantly we just go to the easy one that we can mandate. Well, we're just going to raise your property taxes. I don't really have a choice. Mm-hmm. I mean, it happens from our legislature and everything else, and you don't really have a choice. It's the path of least resistance to get
Ask Washingtonians.
money. I know.
Paying 4 times what we are in property tax for the same house.
Oh.
Yeah, I love this concept of states competing for good citizens. Like once you put that in my mind, Eric, I can't get rid of it. And it's so true. And it leads me to my next question is like, how do you feel about growth in Idaho? I mean, I think Idaho is attracting some of the best people in the country to come here. Some of the brightest minds, hardest workers, the best values, which is something we stick to. I mean, all of our real estate clients, we're the number 1 team in North Idaho, by the way, real estate, if you're looking to move here. All of our real estate clients are cut from the same cloth. They all come here and they say the same things to us. And it's like, it's awesome. They're good people moving up here. And we like that. We don't want the bad ones to move here. But how do you feel about growth? How do you manage that from the governor's seat?
Yeah, so first, I think for everyone who's watching, I would actually put a correction in there. It's not that awesome, as far as politically speaking. Mm-hmm. It's fake, and so the example there is you've got this beautiful, amazing red sports car, and you're walking around and it's shiny and beautiful, and it goes 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds, and you're talking about it and everything, and then someone's like, "Oh, pop the hood." Well, that sports car's Idaho. You pop the hood, and inside is this like nasty, disgusting blue engine, or maybe purple. Okay, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The thing that's running this beautiful red state is a corrupt purple group of people, and they're liars and deceivers. And it blows my mind. Some of these people who vote with Democrats 70% of the time, or even more. And when they run for re-election as a Republican, they put conservative Republican in front of it. And they just flat out lie. And they have money behind them. And then a little bit of name recognition because they've been there. And they just get back into office again. And meanwhile, we have this populace who's not paying attention. And everyone's just like, look at our red sports car. It's amazing. Don't you want to come here and drive this red sports car? And so that's just a little bit of a correction. And people who are coming here, they should be prepared to fight. But as governor, in a governor position, when you create this kind of government that I'm talking about, a populist government, and the governor is showing up in person in the Lincoln Auditorium down south, and then whatever venue up here, because I would be traveling around the state doing this, and inviting the public to show up in a public place on camera and ask questions to your governor, and I will answer you. And if I don't know the answer, I'll say, I don't know, but I'll put it on my podcast, on my governor's podcast this week or whatever. I'll do the research. But that's just one example of what I want to do. And so people would know that the governor is actually reachable. I could go ask him a question where he has to answer it on camera in front of everybody in Idaho. How likely is it that you would have a governor who's doing a bunch of shady stuff if he's willing to stand in front of live cameras
Right.
that's broadcast across Idaho once a month around the state where anybody can come in and ask the question. That's the way I feel like every representative should be. We should be so transparent that we're like, oh, you want to do an audit? Yeah, please go ahead and do an audit. This is the people's money. Of course you can do an audit, right? And so that's what I want to build. Now, if I do it, we are totally we're going to be in trouble as far as growth goes because everybody's going to want to come here. But it'll be all the good people, the people that are attracted to, transparency and honesty and getting rid of corruption, and not the people that want to come in and be like, oh, that sounds like a place where I could weasel my way in and get power position and everything.
Well, how does that, I mean, that sets a tone, right, for everybody below you. That sets tone for your cabinet. That sets tone for the legislature. That sets tone for every other public elected official in Idaho. That's a scary thing for a lot of people that are in that position, right? Because if you're going to follow a governor that says, hey, we're going to be open and transparent, and I'm expecting and I'm encouraging you to go out and be open with the people that represent you, a lot of people can't answer those questions.
Yeah, and that's why it'll be really interesting, because we're in crunch time now. As soon as April 1st rolls around through May 19th, it'll be really interesting when people ask your representative, and you all should ask your representatives, who are you supporting for governor? And it'd be really interesting the way that they respond to that, because I realize I'm a little bit of a wild card. We haven't got into some of the more wild things I've done, but I'm a little bit of a wild card. And so I understand there's a hesitancy for people to say, yeah, I fully back, Mark Fitzpatrick, the owner of Old State Saloon. But also, the way this is we know what's going on in the current governor's office, and we've watched Mark, what he's done the last few years. That guy stands up in front of people and tells the truth and answers questions to live audiences. That's what I do. I went to Stand Up Idaho last week, and I did that way before political stuff, right? Way before I even thought about doing that. But I went to Stand Up Idaho last week, and I spoke for 30 minutes and then took 90 minutes of questions from the audience. And it's all out there. You can look it up.
Yeah.
It's on Rumble. And so this is an example of what I would be doing. I am not like trying to convince people that I have the answer for every policy thing that's going to happen in Idaho. Certainly not. But the best answer starts with a foundation of truth and transparency. And that's what I'm going to bring to every aspect that I can get my hands on.
On the flip side, Eric and I went to Governor Little, did a speech at the Coeur d'Alene Resort a month ago. Yeah. And we were like, oh, cool. We're going to go ask some questions, right?
Oh, by the way, after we paid, after you paid
$65 after being a member of the
commerce that we paid for, and then you pay more to go to the lunch.
He gave a very canned speech that I really got nothing out of.
We're no longer a part of the Chamber of Commerce.
No, we're not.
I got nothing out of this speech. And then when it came time for questions, we quickly realized that they had pre-selected everyone that was going to ask a question. And I'm sure he has screened the questions coming up. So
because I had a couple. If they'd opened it up.
We were going to ask about the bed tax, resort
the resort tax. Yeah.
So we didn't get an opportunity. And that was extremely frustrating to me. I was like, okay, this guy... and Governor Little, if I've offended you, you are welcome to come on our podcast anytime.
He won't.
I don't think so. But he's just purely polished politician, and I was like, it doesn't do it for me. I want transparency.
I don't know if he's really that polished either. But he's a manager, and that's what some people know him very well have said. He's a good manager, but he's not an idea guy, and he's certainly not about transparency, the things that we're discussing right now. And so there you have it. I did come up with an idea that I think I'm going to do in my campaign here just like 10 seconds ago when you were talking. So I'm going to tell you.
Sweet.
It originated here.
Because you just said something about paying. So that's what triggered it. So you said paying. And like these events that I want to do where I'll stand in the Lincoln Auditorium and take questions and I'll invite people. I'm actually going to pick a date out after the swearing in next year, which I think is January 3rd or 4th. So I'll pick it out on a Wednesday later in January, and I'm going to tell everyone to save the date for the very first Governor Fitzpatrick invitation, and I'm going to provide a taco bar in the hallway free of charge for everybody who shows up, and you can come in and answer questions. I'm going to put it out there and tell everyone to save the date.
That would be rad.
Yeah.
I would go down there for that. That would be great.
You had me at tacos.
So let's take a sidebar real quick because he brought it up. Old State Saloon?
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about your saloon. You guys have done some pretty interesting things over the past couple of years.
Your social media is just
and it's
amazing.
he started telling me, I started giggling about it. Some of the things you guys have done. Talk to us about your saloon and why it's been a little controversial, and some of the stuff that you've done that's kind of got you on the map.
So I did. We moved here. My family moved here in 2018, and I got into, and I had a long history of real estate. I'm a real estate broker, and I was selling a lot of homes when I first moved here to people moving here mainly from California, Oregon, Washington, etc. Very like-minded people, and I reinvested some of that money back into businesses that I thought would be a good idea because they had real estate with them, and that I would just like start those businesses and go. I had no idea how difficult they would be. Very difficult. One of them, you're going to laugh at me for not thinking this was going to be difficult, but one of them was is a wedding venue. Weddings are difficult. Let me just tell you.
A lot of emotions flying around
Yes.
those things. Yeah.
But I've got a really, really good crew, staff of people, and it's managed very well now.
I've done about 6 weddings, just so you know, if you ever need anybody.
Right on. Thank you. So I'm a marketer. It's one of the things that I'm better at. There are plenty of things I'm not good at, but I'm a good marketer. And so I did some marketing for the wedding venue, and we increased our bookings a lot. And you're booking stuff a year and a half, sometimes 2 years out. Sometimes people book 2.5 years out. It's crazy. But we're booked a lot of weddings for that following season, a year out. And the way that you serve alcohol, because it's in the county, is that you have to have a bar from the city that has a liquor license, get a one-day permit from the county, and then show up, obeying the rules of that one-day permit at a different location to cater the alcohol there. You can't have a liquor license at the wedding venue itself, okay? So with all these weddings booked, I thought to myself, I got to go buy a bar. And
Sounds terrible.
Yeah, I never thought that I would actually own a bar. I never occurred to me. But I went knocking on some doors and walked into the Orville Jackson building in Eagle, which has been around, built in 1906, and has a lot of history to it. It's very nostalgic for people, the location. I walked in, and it had been a bar. It had been many things throughout its history, but most recently a bar owned by Bill, and that was, he had it for 12, 13 years. Okay, so I walked in, and it's a pretty divey place, and I just said, hey, any chance you'd be willing to sell? I'm looking to buy a bar. And he said, yeah, actually, come back tomorrow. So I came back the next day, and we talked, and we basically made a deal on a napkin. And 30 days later, I now owned a bar. Well, it just so happened of the places that I asked, it was this amazing location that's the center of Eagle, and it's got that history and the nostalgia and everything, and the age in 1906 and everything. And man, I felt this real obligation to not just have it be the minimal thing that I originally was intending to buy a bar for. Just I'll have a minimal bar, and the main purpose is so that I can do the things I want to do over at the wedding venue. But I had and then it started growing, and I put a lot into redesigning, remodeling the inside of it and making it look really nice. And I truly wanted it to become a place where people would gather together and have good conversations. So no TV. We have screens up, and they're mainly for marketing purposes and showing people events coming up. But I thought, hey, I'm going to have a bar where we don't play football. We don't play sporting events. It's not a sports bar. It's going to be like a tavern of old, like the taverns that were around when our country was founded and where the Marine Corps was recruited. This was before people had the entertainment that would distract them.
Right.
And they actually knew how to engage in a real conversation.
They had to have conversations, yeah.
Right. And we used to have the art of debate, and people could respectfully debate each other, and then sometimes not respectfully, and they'd spill it out on the street and kill each other in a duel or something like that. But for the most part, people used to know how to have conversations with each other, and today we're just behind screens doing this, screaming at each other. Then when we go to a bar, we're supposed to now check your religion and politics at the door. That's the way our society is. And you can go into places today and you start talking politics, and they'll say, no politics in here. They say that. My menu, when you open up our menu, there's a letter from my wife and myself to everybody. And the first paragraph basically says that most places tell you to check your religion and politics at the door, and we invite you to bring them in. Let's discuss them. That's the way we are here. And we want to foster those conversations. And so we have events that are geared towards fostering those conversations. We'll bring in a speaker, and it could be somebody who's somebody who runs a podcast, an influencer. It could be a doctor. We've had doctors coming in to talk about those things that they wanted everybody to get after the pandemic. So we've had that, and we've had other doctors come in. We've had politicians come in. We've had Republican events. We've had conspiracy theory trivia nights where we give away.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Blaine would have a heyday.
Oh my God.
he would
I
have
might
a-
bring Blaine down there for
Yeah,
that. That would be great.
pretty fun.
The next one I think is coming up in May, and so we always give away an AR-15 on those
Oh,
nights.
come on.
Yeah, so
I'm in.
It's a lot of fun, and the place is packed every time we do the conspiracy theory trivia night. But we do all these events, and some of the people are a little bit controversial that are speaking. Like sometimes we'll have a speaker, and we've had Ian Carroll come in numerous times. He's a good friend. Do you know him? Mm-mm. Don't know who Ian Carroll. Okay, he's got several million followers online. But the people some of them are controversial, and they'll speak. But the thing that everybody has to do who speaks at Old State Saloon to our audience is that they have to be willing to take questions. Just like the governor of Idaho should be willing to
That's
do, right?
awesome.
And so I get up and I introduce it every time, and I say, hey, look, the reason we're gathering in this place is to listen to somebody present something, and then we're all going to have a discussion about it. And I go around the room with a microphone. The person who's presenting is still up there, and we engage in a conversation, question, answer, et cetera. And it's been meaningful. And so we do those kind of things. We do those things that are like, I got, when we did our first conspiracy theory trivia night, they wrote about it in the Idaho Hatesman, and covered it and made fun of it. And then it kind of like actually helped more people get there for the next one and everything. And then we went into May of 24, and this is where, I'm looking at June. We're talking about celebrating my daughter's birthday, and she was turning 9 or 10 at the time. And then we had just gotten to this point where we're like, okay, well, we have to avoid Boise, pretty much everywhere in Boise in June because it's Pride Month. And Boise is extremely gay during Pride Month and extremely LGBTQ. And then, it's just something like I want to avoid that. I'm not going down there. So we decide I'm thinking, what could we do at Old State Saloon that would be different? And I started thinking about God's design for sexuality, and I started thinking about how awesome it is. And I think, okay, let's just do Heterosexual Awesomeness Month for June. And it went crazy, globally, around the world, viral. And I've got a couple papers that came out and did articles and called me a bigot for doing it. And at first it was
the Idaho Hatesman one of
Yes.
those? I caught that little.
Okay, but if you look up, if you actually look up the original article about this, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was well written, and it was actually pretty funny, even though he's totally run my name through the mud, right? But then people were really pissed about them calling me a bigot, because essentially all I was saying was, you can do what you want to do. We're celebrating this over here. We're looking a different direction for this month. And we're going to have beers for breeders on Mondays for any male who's a heterosexual who walks in, gets a free beer on Mondays.
Beer for breeders. I like that.
Oh my goodness.
So they hated it, but we got this huge following of people supporting it from across the world.
Right.
And people were calling in to buy rounds of drinks for people, and I'll buy for the next heterosexual who walks in, dinner or whatever, all these cool things. And so we marched forward and did that. That's who we are. And so we continue to do things like that. We're coming up on our 3rd annual Heterosexual Awesomeness Month. The level of evil that it got to, though, as far as the people who didn't like what I was doing, helped me realize just how evil the LGBTQ agenda is for the extreme part of it. Okay.
It's always the extreme.
Now, the LGB, there were many of them that wrote in support and called in support and sent messages and even showed up
That's cool.
in support of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the rest of the alphabet and the extreme part of it were horrible by the thousands. And sometimes I got more than 1,000 messages a day. And they're sending me pornographic image because they know I'm Christian. Sending me pornographic images of Jesus and just like the most disgusting things you can think
That's
of.
dirty.
I was the most reviewed. We were the most reviewed Old State Saloon bar in the country on Facebook because Facebook has a lot of LGBTQ people, but they put you in a group, and the group comes and they leave you these reviews, and they're all bogus reviews, obviously. But Facebook leaves them all up. And there's things like they would describe an experience like, oh, I was there and the French fries were cold. Well, we don't even have French fries, okay? But French fries were cold. And then I walked in the bathroom and I saw the owner and he was molesting a 12-year-old boy or whatever. Just stuff like that. It's just crazy. Like, it's very like demonic type of these people are just lost. And so that all happened, and I went through all that. And that's what I was talking about earlier, is like going through this time and then realizing I think this just prepared me to run for governor, you know?
Yeah.
You've had enough mud slung at you that you're like, all right, my family and I can weather this.
Well, there's this desire, like, you should be able to celebrate who you are. And I mean that with anybody, right? The problem is that we've gotten to a point that when we do LGBTQ month and things like that, it's everybody must celebrate who I am.
Right.
Right? It's not you celebrating who you are.
Right.
It's everybody must celebrate who I am. And I've always told everybody, I get in this conversation, I'm a Christian. I get in this conversation with people a lot of times that say, well, what do you think about Islam? I'm like, well, what are we asking? And they're like, well, I mean, do you think it's true? I go, no, I don't think it's true. And they go, well, and I get this, well, that's hateful. And okay, so hold on. If I have a belief that is either defined by my faith, my morals, my ethics, however you want to define it, not saying it's right or wrong. If I have a belief, then inherently that means that my belief states that I believe you are wrong.
Correct.
And that's okay.
Correct.
That's okay to have those beliefs, and it's okay to celebrate who you are. But it's become very, very negative to celebrate if you are certain things, because those are considered, well, every month is heterosexual month.
Right.
No. That's not how it works. In fact, it's never been that way until all of a sudden we've been asked to celebrate who you are.
Right.
You can celebrate who you are. I can celebrate who I am. And I think that's okay for anybody to take that stance on it.
So things did shift a little bit the way that I was handling things, because that's the way it was. That's how I looked at it. Okay. But because of the extreme, I started actually doing a little bit of research into this. And that's when I really started learning a lot more about the transgender agenda, specifically with children, and how much money was behind it. And it was going throughout our school system in our country. And I think a lot of people, the majority of normal, ethical, everyday people, were completely oblivious to how much money and this agenda that was going into essentially deceiving children into believing the lie that a boy is not a boy necessarily and a girl's not a girl necessarily.
Do you think there's a literal battle between good and evil going on in the country right now?
Absolutely.
I see it too. We had a guest on a while back that said that, well, this was specific to North Idaho, but I think it applies to all of Idaho, that God is building an army in Idaho. And that's kind of one of those things that just stuck with me, and it keeps rolling around in the back of my brain, because the more of this things that you see out there, I don't know what else to attribute it to other than good and evil. Yeah,
and it's definitely a national struggle there, and it has been driven by money. And that money, I'm already seeing the results of being cut. I mentioned earlier of the results of that, and you can see that these programs and these goals and ideologies have less power because they don't have that money behind them and the funding behind them. And it's all since about a year ago when this administration came in and started doing Doge and cutting all that money that's going out. But yeah, so that's when it shifted, and I started speaking out against it. Okay, so it was originally like, you do your thing, we're doing ours, And that was not okay to them, and they threatened me, and I kept doubling down. No, we're still celebrating. No, I'm gonna add beer for breeders. I'm gonna add this. I'm gonna add that. And I wouldn't stop. And then because of the amount of death threats and evil things that I got, I learned more about them, and then so I started speaking out about it. Well, then it pissed them off more, but then I also got more support. Facebook takes my entire 20,000 follower
I was gonna
page. It's gone.
Of course.
And it just now I just don't have. That was my main back then. That was my main place to put out information.
That's what's crazy to me is that you're at a point now where people are literally threatening to kill somebody. I mean, it's just the level of violence and the things that people say absolutely blow my mind. They absolutely blow my mind. That people can take it to that level where all of a sudden now they're threatening physical harm. They're taking away income for your family, taking away your exposure, everything else. I mean, it's absolutely nuts how, like you said, I mean, it is a very violent network that's out there to prevent you from, living your life.
And suppressing your speech, that's like so frustrating to me. I mean, we go through that with some of the platforms that we're on is certain things we put out, certain things we talk about, even though if you actually listen to the whole thing, we're extremely reasonable and we're open to discourse of any kind. It'll get suppressed and you can tell right away that it's happening. And I'm like, God dang, that's frustrating, man. Is X like your biggest platform now? Because it's, thank you, Elon.
Right now.
Thank you, Elon.
Yeah, seriously, if we didn't have X, I don't even know if but another really cool, interesting example, Instagram. During this most recent thing I did, which was an offer of a free beer for a month to anybody who helped ICE give them information, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, give them information that got a deportation, ended up with a deportation, would get free beer for a month. Well, DHS retweeted that, and it went like,
that's hilarious.
It was hilarious. They retweeted it.
No way.
Yes. And so,
I love it.
And they did it in a very funny way. If you remember the Dinosaurs sitcom with the characters that were actually dinosaurs back. So the dad dinosaur just dropping his beer, that one clip where he drops his beer and then they retweeted it.
No way.
It was, so then everybody retweeted it, and I was on Fox News again and OAN, all these places. And so, so in all that, I was getting death threats again. And these threats this time were less dark and they were more violent.
Yeah.
So when I had all the threats from LGBTQ, they were dark. I guess spiritually, I was what I would say there. But when I did this one, it was definitely more violent. There was more threats to burn the building down. And then one example, Boise BLM on Instagram. Going through, and it's a post about what I did essentially, and then all these posts, and many of them were directly basically saying we should burn the building down. The building needs to be burned, and all that stuff. And so those were all left up for days. I even did a video about it and showed people, on the video and everything. And then on the same days, people are calling me a racist and all this stuff, and I said, "You're a liar." Enter. Instagram comes back and says, "You're not allowed to say that."
See, that's what's crazy is that when you talk about inciting violence, right? Inciting violence is really a very subjective term, right?
Right.
Because it really depends on the audience that you're looking at, right? If you say something somebody doesn't like, that could be considered inciting violence if they respond violently. So it's so subjective, but actual violence, actual threats of violence are the things that they're not suppressing, but they're allowing you to say something, well, that's your fault because you said it and made that person feel that way. That's nuts.
Yeah.
You said I'm a liar and they took that away? Or
I said you're a liar. Yeah. You're a liar. You're lying.
No way.
Well, when they call me a name, they're calling me, so they let those let's burn down his building. They let that stuff stay up. But then they call me a name for being racist because I want to support Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and I'm saying no, you're a liar. That's ridiculous. And then Instagram tells me I'm not allowed to say that about him. It's just crazy.
Well, they control the platforms. I mean, with a couple of exceptions, but how much easier is it to paint anybody that holds your values and belief systems if you don't even get a voice? If they're allowed to suppress that single side, then they get to control the narrative about you, that you're a bigot and a racist and a homophobe and a transphobe and all of that stuff. They get to control that narrative, and they don't even allow for civil discourse. That's why Elon, in the first place, he talked about having to take over or feeling compelled to take over Twitter because that is now the digital town square where people can actually have civil discourse. It's a lot easier to paint us into it. I say us collectively, there's a lot of similar values here, but to paint that value base into a corner and label them whatever you want, whatever the buzzword is that week, if they get no speech themselves. It's those platforms. I mean, that was systematic. There was no question in my mind, even mainstream media, which is nothing. Legacy media is dead to me. But that was absolutely intentional.
Can we switch gears a little bit? I'm curious about what it's like to campaign in Idaho. You've been up here a couple of times, in North Idaho specifically. I feel like what you're saying right now will resonate with, for sure, people in North Idaho. I don't know the Boise area as much. What's the campaign trail like? What are you doing to get out there?
So we've been going everywhere to Lincoln Day events and then creating events surrounding those events everywhere we're traveling and getting in front of people and groups and talking. And I would say, and this is not an exaggeration, if I'm really estimating, I would say about 98% of the people that we talk to are saying, thank God you're running. We really need to get little out of here.
Yep.
And that's everywhere we're going. There are certainly more establishment people, and there are more establishment committees, but still, even on these committees, but the people that are showing up too are more likely, to be like, we need to get them out. So that is a very good sign. The challenge is just getting enough people to know what's going on. So I do have something that is coming next week that I'm pretty excited about, but it's I think a creative way of getting Governor Little to not ignore my invitation for a debate.
Is it free beer?
No.
Oh, all right.
Although, yeah, it's a good idea.
I think that's a great idea. I mean,
right. So he won't. That's if you think about it, would he ever debate me? No, he won't.
That's frustrating. That's what, when we talk about discourse and everything else, that's what's supposed to happen.
It should be mandatory.
Right? It should be required that the two of you sit down and we ask you similar questions, and you come up with your answer and he comes up with his.
I would love to moderate that.
How do you outside of that, how do you value or how do you validate two different people when you're being asked all the questions you want to answer and you're being asked all the questions you want to answer? You can't. You have to put you guys in the same aquarium and say, okay, here's what it is.
Well, you do have one guy who's standing there and letting anybody ask any questions. That's me.
Yep.
And you have one guy who absolutely will not do that. And we've seen the example. What's supposed to happen is the good, free, honest media is supposed to be coming in and investigating and reporting and doing all those things. But we do not have that. We have a very leftist media, especially in that area by the Capitol and Boise and everything. Very leftist and or establishment. And they don't challenge the governor's office. I don't think I've ever seen them really challenge them on anything.
You are supposed to be challenged.
Yep. And ask questions and have them dig into it. And so why would a leftist media not challenge a Republican governor? The answer is because for a leftist, for a liberal, Governor Little is the best that they could hope for in a red state like this.
Yeah.
You know whose fault that is? That is our fault as a society and a collection of voters. You should seek to gather enough information to make an informed decision at the ballot box. And the reason he wouldn't do it, if I put myself in his shoes, and you've already got the backing of the majority of the committees in the state, I would say, collectively, and somebody's getting a return on investment, would you risk it?
Well, that's your best chance of getting reelected, is just to be quiet.
Exactly. He's very confident that he will, right? It's all risk, no gain, because it won't matter to the majority of voters.
You retain the championship belt if you never fight again.
Yeah.
So when you say committees, are you talking about Republican Central committees?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's actually not true.
Good.
So the official ones that are officially doing recommended are recommending me. So we have Kootenai County, third largest county in Idaho, and then Nez Perce just announced yesterday they're recommending me for governor. And then the other ones that I've talked to are very much in support of me. They tell me that, but they it's not part of their policy to do that officially.
Really?
So anyone that I know of that's taken an official public stance has recommended me. They voted 29-8 in Kootenai County after I did all the vetting, I did all the interviews, answered multiple questions, background investigation. It's pretty extensive what they did, and they voted 29-8 me versus Brad Little.
So you're saying there's a chance?
Yeah.
So it went out. So that's going out. They go send my trifold out to 33,000 houses. I think there's something similar with Nez Pierce. There's PCs are calling me from all these other committees asking for trifolds and things. So they are walking around door to door. I am telling you, this is plausible.
Is Little starting to sweat a little bit, or is he not even paying attention?
So I have a feeling. He knows that I'm running against him. I saw him at an event, and we were walking like this. So we had so I said, "Sir, I'm running against you," and he said, "Oh, I know," and he shook my hand, and then he said, "Good luck with that." And it seemed pretty genuine. He wasn't being sarcastic or anything. He was being a statesman. And so and as he's walking, and he's still this close to me, I'm like, "Sir, I think we should put together a date for a debate, right?" And then he just continues to walk.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, question, just because, Idaho, a lot of people can look at the U.S. and say, okay, you want more or less government involvement. And I'd say a lot of people that are truly, red, white, and blue, and they understand the greatness of having states' rights. Okay. This has been a debate for 250 years or wherever we're at right now, right? This has been going on forever. How do you, as a governor of a state, you would be in contact with Trump? Have you ever met him before?
I've not.
You've not? Okay. Well, if you become governor, I guarantee you will.
Yes.
So, I'm certain there's some point that obviously after the Republican election and those types of things, and somebody's actually a front runner, there could be an endorsement from him and those types of things. How does the relationship between the governor of Idaho and the president work? And is there a need to protect our state? And I say that very softly, right? Because
You're setting me up for my next question.
whoa, am I?
Yeah.
Because there's a little bit of frustration between overreach, federal government overreach, right? And a lot of people you've heard random calls for Greater Idaho and the separation from the states and everything else. So that's always going to be there, whether it's just folklore or whatever else. But is there a need and a desire to protect Idaho specifically as the governor? And what does that relationship look like with the president?
I don't know what the relationship would look like. I do feel there are some significant similarities between myself and Trump, especially being a complete outsider to politics, and the way that I'm a pretty blunt guy. He's a pretty blunt guy. I will call people out. We should get back to Mayor McLean in a minute, and he calls people out. But to go in, so I don't know exactly what the relationship looks like. I'll learn a lot more about that. But I think the way I stand on the state is that the same way that I would stand for any government. I want as little overreach and as little involvement as possible, the bare absolute minimum. I'd like to gain back control of our own lands. I don't really want federal. I want to just completely and permanently I just want Idaho to have control of it. I don't know the legalities of all that as we sit here today, but that's something that I would definitely march towards doing. And perhaps you are able to more easily get it done by building that relationship over some time. Or perhaps it's simply getting enough of the people aware of the benefits that we could be having if we didn't have federal government restrictions on getting access to thorium, mining or whatever it's called, and using that in nuclear energy, devices and things like that, which would be extremely valuable. But nobody's really looking into these things because there's regulations that kind of put a stop to it all. And, they say that we have vast amounts of oil and natural gas and things in this country that are far more than, what you would find in Middle East and some of the places around the world that are supposed to be very, very high. But it's just there's so much restrictions on us doing that. If we actually lifted those restrictions, we would unleash a value that would make us to be way, way beyond whatever we've been as far as being rich and strong and powerful. So I want complete independence as much as absolute possible from the federal government and their overreach over Idaho. putting the right people in position here, we could set ourselves up to become a very, very rich and wealthy state. And I would think that we can eliminate, as we touched on earlier, eliminate a lot of the taxes.
Well, I feel like Trump would probably very much agree with your economic policy of trying to increase, find other sources of revenue here. And I also think he would probably have a beer in June at your bar. I think you should invite him down there.
That would be
I have
good.
a feeling he would show up.
He doesn't drink, but a Diet Coke or whatever.
That's fine. I'm willing to bet he would come and check out your bar.
So I have this one question that I wrote down on the note of protecting Idaho. Have you ever thought of starting an Idaho State Guard, not an Idaho National Guard, but an Idaho State Guard that answers only to Idaho, not to the federal government? I know Texas is looking into this.
I think it's a great idea. I think that we should, as a country, but as states, take the idea of our right to have a militia seriously. And I think that should have like very serious, organized, constitutionally sound efforts taking place by people. And when you go over the numbers, and you could get people involved and signed up on it, the amount of education that can be provided to people who want to become part of that. And if you think about taking it on a national level, it's funny that you bring this up. Like, I've actually thought about forming something like this on a national and then breaking it off on state levels. If everybody on a national level, let's say we had, I'm not going to say the name that I've come up with because I don't want to go that far, but if we came up with a national militia and everybody gave $100 and a million people were in there, we would have $100 million a year. $100 a year, 100 million, and how powerful that would be, knowing that there's a million man army that's kind of ready to go to defend our country, constitutionally speaking, and that we have legal, and $100 million, there's a lot you can do with that. And there's lobbying that's just and right and constitutional, and we can make sure things are paid attention to, and we can put pressure on legislators and everything to do things that are constitutional and right and protect us in every which way and form. So having that idea at every state level, is critically important too. And having people ready to go to a situation, whether it's a natural disaster and we need to call out, 5,000 people that are like ready to go, or it's, hopefully never, but some sort of situation where we start having kinetic warfare on our soil.
Yeah, it comes back to accountability, right? Idaho would yield a bigger stick that is controlled by Idaho, not the federal government. Idaho is the largest concentration per capita of veterans and former first responders anywhere in the U.S. I don't know if that's actually true, but I keep saying it. So I think it's true. I think it's true. And the amount of experience, we're involved in some veterans clubs up here, some first responder clubs. The amount of experience in those two worlds is unparalleled, especially in North Idaho. So there would be no shortage of people that were experienced and skilled that would jump on that opportunity, I think. Yeah. So
I think maybe not the most by number, but the most by
correct
population
concentration.
Yeah,
concentration. Yeah, I agree. Anyway, I was dying to ask you that question. Okay, when you win, first day in office, what do you do?
Wow. So I'm going to fire a lot of people. The bureaucracy that has been put in place is, I think, off the charts and needs to be dealt with, I'm sure. There's no doubt. And basically what I think learning from an administration like the Trump administration, the second time in, they figured out we're going to eliminate all these positions. And that was something they aggressively went after. So that alone will shrink the government budget, but then to replace them with a team of people who are on the same page about transparency, and then starting a path forward of building a dissemination of information to the people. And I want to teach the people how we can decentralize media and get away from these few media sources and teach them the value of independent investigative journalists and people who distribute content information similar to this, and how we can, as a society, support those types of places and individuals and things like that, but also at the same time learn how to discern between genuine, truthful reporting and reporting that might be attached to financial motivation, right? And so there's no way, just like everything in life, we're not going to put together some perfect media solution that's going to stay perfect, because money and power and things will come in and corrupt that, right? It's just what happens. So we have to teach people how to, that meme of, I think it's Leonardo DiCaprio on the couch, like pointing at the TV, like, I recognize what's going on here. Yeah. So I want to teach Idahoans, and we should teach each other to recognize when there's a media source that's, sending us a bunch of BS, and to basically call them out on it. And if people make a practice out of discerning between good and evil and deception and everything, especially in the media, we can be more likely to have reliable, continuous truth coming out, with truthful information coming out, because they say it's a war of information. The war that we have and we're dealing with the last several decades has been controlled information. So we want to distribute media out through many sources and have it to be less controlled by evil, and just have people to be motivated to report truth, and to have the people more likely to share the truly truthful information that's coming out, as far as
undoctored, just unfiltered, just this is what happened. This is the truth, and not let it be played a certain way or anything else like that.
So day one, to get back to you, I want to set up that, like, I want people to realize this is what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
We're setting forward this path, and it's that path of getting the people very much involved and informed.
That's going to take a lot of energy and a lot of conviction. Do you have that in you?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's more me saying that, answering your question right now. I've demonstrated it. I've shown it, and so it's not just words that are being said.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, there have definitely been times where it's been pretty difficult, and I could easily, and you guys will understand this, I could easily stop doing all of the culture war and now political stuff and do very well in real estate if I focused on real estate stuff. I was doing very well. I would make, is like to the world standards, if the goal is to make money and, have a bunch of that, I could easily do that. This is something that I'm doing because it's a calling, because I care about the people of Idaho, but most importantly, I care about truth. And I've just gotten to the point where, I just don't care what kind of damage the truth causes, because that damage needs to happen, and we can rebuild. We'll use that damage. We'll just rebuild on that foundation of truth, and we'll build something that's much stronger and beneficial for our children.
Reagan made a huge speech about appeasement, and that's a problem for us. When we start appeasing everybody, there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Follow-up question to that. If you don't win this go around, what's next? Are you going to keep doing what you're doing? You're going to come at it again?
I don't have an answer for that. I haven't really thought about that. I know that I'm not going to stop, publicly speaking about what's true, and no matter what. I think that, I was calling around a lot before I made an announcement about this, and I was saying, who's running? Do you know of anybody running? I know a lot of people in the political realm, and I don't know of anybody running against Brad Little. Nobody's running. And I said, well, I'm thinking about doing it. I let people know ahead of my announcement, I'm thinking about doing this. And is there any reason I shouldn't? Do you know of anybody else that's running? No. If there had been somebody who was running who I was like, yeah, that would be a great person, I wouldn't have ran. But there was nobody running. My goal in life is to not be the governor of Idaho. My goal in life is to be an effective person that can fill a position that will help glorify God and bring truth up and shine a light on corruption and evil and darkness and lies. That's my goal in life. So wherever that is next, it kind of just depends on what happens, I don't really have if you're asking me if I'm going to run again for sure in 4 years from now, I can't say that, because it depends on who's running, what do they look like, how have the last 4 years gone, and everything. Where does God want me to be?
I got to say, when I ask someone, why they're running or whatever, and they say they don't want to do it, I'm like, that's the perfect person.
Right.
Every time. If you have aspirations to be in politics for life, you shouldn't be in politics.
Right, but then you brought up earlier, it's just like some of those people go in and then they get corrupted, you know, and so that's what we have to figure out is how to protect those people that go in with an altruistic attitude. But sometimes, it's just like, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So it's like, those are part of the temptations.
We're watching Beast games at home right now, and everybody seems to have a price, man.
Right.
Everybody's got it. So just be careful with that, because we'd love to see you stay true to what you want to do with it, for sure.
Part of it's our fault and our system, right? What it requires to get to a position like that traditionally requires so much investment from outside sources that you spend your entire time returning on that investment.
Yep.
So whatever their original intentions, then they get in there and it's like you spend your whole time just paying off the people that got you there.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Mark, thank you. This has been a really fun conversation.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Mark, real quick before we go, how often do you get asked if you look like Gary Sinise?
I get a lot.
Okay.
That's
Right when he
Yeah,
walked
yeah.
in, man, I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
I'm like, this
Yeah.
guy. Yeah. That's awesome. He's a good guy. I like Gary
Yeah,
Sinise.
he's a great guy.
Yeah.
For sure.
I get Danny DeVito, dude. You're definitely way ahead. You're way ahead.
That's funny.
That's
Cool.
awesome.
Yeah, well, really, thank you very much for taking time to stop in here and visit us in Coeur d'Alene. Best of luck to you. I can safely say right now, we don't endorse a lot of political people, and I'm not endorsing this from the channel. I'm just saying personally, you will have my vote for this.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
I'd say that too. Like I
Yeah.
said, I think that's pretty cool, and I'd love to see some change, and I'd love to see somebody that can get in there and actually be authentic.
Thank you. And honestly, the way I feel when people say that to me is that you're saying that the people have your vote. Because it's not. It's like I don't feel like this is about me. This mission is about the people and what's right. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and you'll
appreciate you.
keep
For
their
everybody's
voices in mind, man. That's an honorable path you're taking, and it's divergent from what a lot of people are getting into with politics because it becomes about power.
Will do.
I'm in.
Yeah. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you,
Yep.
sir.
Thanks,
Mark
guys.
Fitzpatrick, thank you so much.
Yep.